Most people believe worry is a form of protection, like a guard standing faithfully at the gate. But what if the guard has been keeping peace out just as much as danger? There was once someone who thought constant vigilance was the price of caring deeply, until exhaustion began to whisper that something gentler might exist. This story is for those who feel tired of bracing for storms that rarely arrive. You may recognize the feeling, that quiet tension during calm moments, as if ease itself were suspicious and needed supervision. Perhaps you've rehearsed conversations that never happened, or carried invisible weight through days that looked ordinary from the outside. If so, there's a soft relief waiting here, not in fixing life, but in seeing it differently. Because the strange truth is this: peace doesn't come from predicting every possible pain. It grows when attention learns to rest instead of chase. In the story you're about to hear, a weary watcher discovers that awareness can be calm, that the present moment is rarely as dangerous as the mind suggests, and that letting go of constant scanning doesn't mean becoming careless, only becoming free. So, for a little while, you're invited to set down your own invisible binoculars. No effort required, no pressure to change overnight. Just listen, and notice what happens inside when vigilance loosens its grip. You might find that the quiet you've been searching for has been nearby all along, and that a different way of watching the world has been waiting patiently for you to notice. He had a habit of rehearsing disasters while brushing his teeth, as if the mirror might spring bad news on him. Every small silence felt suspicious, every delayed reply a sign of something unraveling. He told himself it was just responsibility, just care wearing a serious face. Yet his shoulders stayed tight, like a coat he couldn't take off even in warm rooms. Somewhere deep down, he wondered when exactly concern had turned into a full-time job. At night, his mind wandered into futures that hadn't asked to be imagined. He'd lie there forecasting conversations, losses, embarrassments that might never arrive. Morning would come, and he'd feel as though he'd traveled far without leaving the bed. People called him thoughtful, dependable. He smiled, a little tired at the edges. No one saw how often he missed the present while guarding doors that weren't even there. On his desk sat a small brass binocular, an old piece he'd found at a street market. He kept it pointed toward the window, though nothing unusual ever happened outside. Without noticing, he'd lift it and scan the street whenever his thoughts grew loud. The glass made ordinary passers-by look like clues in a mystery that didn't exist. Even when set down, it seemed to hum with the need to keep watch. One afternoon, after a sharp comment from a colleague replayed too many times in his head, he caught himself reaching for the binocular before the sting had even settled. He paused, fingers resting on the cool metal, unsure what danger he expected to see. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually made him uneasy. For a brief second, he noticed the stillness watching him back. It struck him, gently, that the same mind scanning for trouble was also capable of noticing silence. He didn't know what to do with that thought, so he just breathed once, slow and unsure. The binocular remained on the desk, patient, as if waiting for instructions he hadn't learned yet. Outside, someone laughed, an ordinary sound, unconnected to any looming catastrophe, and he found himself wondering, not for the first time, whether watching could feel different from worrying. In the days that followed, he began noticing how quickly his hand drifted toward the binocular, not because anything had happened, but because something might. It dawned on him that he wasn't searching for answers, only for a sense of control. The act of scanning gave the illusion that he could stay one step ahead of life. Still, the more he watched for trouble, the less he seemed to notice what was actually there. One quiet morning, sunlight spilled across the floor in a way that felt almost deliberate. He lifted the binocular out of habit, then stopped, remembering that brief moment of stillness. Instead of looking through the lens, he simply held it, feeling its weight in his palm. The room remained ordinary, unthreatened, gently alive with small sounds. For once, nothing required predicting, and the absence of urgency felt strangely unfamiliar. He began to suspect that attention didn't have to grip so tightly to be useful. What if awareness could rest lightly, like an open hand instead of a clenched one? He tested it in small ways, noticing his breath while waiting for the kettle to boil, listening to footsteps in the hallway without assigning them a story. Each time the world stayed calm, as if relieved he wasn't interrogating it. The binocular started to seem less like protection and more like a habit with good intentions. He placed it by the window, untouched, and watched the street with his own eyes instead. People moved, clouds shifted, a dog barked at nothing in particular. Life unfolded without consulting his forecasts, and somehow it managed just fine. He felt a thin thread of ease appear, fragile but unmistakably real. That evening, he wrote a single line on a scrap of paper. Notice, don't chase. He wasn't sure where the words had come from, only that they felt like a quiet permission. The paper rested beside the binocular, two different ways of seeing waiting side by side. As dusk settled, he sensed that peace might not come from controlling the horizon after all. And though he couldn't explain why, the idea made him curious about what he'd been missing. He often told himself that worry was the reason nothing truly terrible had happened yet, as if his vigilance formed an invisible fence around the fragile parts of his life. Friends called him the prepared one, the person who always had a backup plan. He accepted the compliment with a polite nod, hiding how tired it made him feel. Safety, he believed, was something you earned by never relaxing your guard. Yet joy slipped through the cracks of that careful system. Even during laughter, a part of him stayed alert, listening for what might go wrong next. Vacations felt like temporary truces rather than real rest. He'd sit by the sea, binocular tucked in his bag, just in case calm was misleading. It was hard to admit that peace itself had begun to make him uneasy. Sleep became shallow, like floating on water without ever diving under. His mind kept watch even when his body begged for surrender. Sometimes he woke with the strange sense that he had forgotten to worry about something important. On those mornings, he reached for the binocular before his eyes had fully adjusted to the light. The ritual steadied him, though it never truly soothed him. What frightened him most was the idea of letting go. If he stopped anticipating every possible pain, wouldn't he become careless, exposed? He imagined disasters arriving precisely because he had dared to rest. The thought felt like stepping outside without armor in a storm he couldn't see yet. So he kept scanning, hoping exhaustion would pass before his defenses did. One evening, after a long day of silent tension, he caught his reflection in the dark window. The binocular was raised again, though the street below was calm and nearly empty. For a moment, he didn't recognize the person staring back, alert, weary, alone. His arms ached from holding vigilance like a weight that never set down. And somewhere beneath the fatigue, a quiet question stirred that he wasn't sure how to answer. Not long after, he noticed the binocular had begun to feel heavier, though it hadn't changed at all. Its brass surface stayed cool, almost indifferent, as if it belonged to someone less restless. He realized he carried it from room to room now, setting it down only to pick it up again. Like a guard dog that never slept, it seemed to expect danger even in sunlight. The habit had quietly become a companion he didn't remember choosing. Sometimes he caught himself polishing the lenses, clearing away dust that wasn't really there. The motion soothed him, a tiny ritual that made tension feel purposeful. Through the glass, distant shapes sharpened while everything close grew blurred. It struck him, faintly, that the tool designed to see far made it harder to notice what was near. Still, he kept it ready, as if clarity always lived somewhere else. On crowded days, the binocular pressed against his ribs inside his bag. He'd feel it during conversations, a reminder that vigilance was waiting patiently. Even kind words from others didn't quiet the sense that something unpredictable lingered. So he'd excuse himself, step outside, and scan the horizon like a sailor searching for storms. The act left him both relieved and oddly lonelier than before. One afternoon, a child in the park pointed at the object and asked what he was looking for. He opened his mouth, then paused, surprised to find no clear answer. The child shrugged and ran off, satisfied with the mystery. He stood there holding the binocular, suddenly aware of how tightly his hands gripped it. For a fleeting second, he wondered who was really holding whom. That evening, he placed it on the table and stepped back, half expecting it to call him over. The room felt unfamiliar without the quiet hum of constant alertness. He sat down, hands empty, unsure where to rest his attention instead. Outside, dusk unfolded gently, not asking to be monitored or predicted, and in that widening stillness, he sensed that something, or someone, might soon interrupt the pattern. The interruption came quietly, in the form of an older woman who often sat on the same park bench. He had seen her before, feeding crumbs to birds with an ease that made time look unhurried. This time she glanced at the binocular in his hands and smiled, not curious, just kind. "Must be tiring," she said softly, as if commenting on the weather. He almost asked how she knew, but something in her calm made explanations feel unnecessary. She watched the trees sway for a while, saying nothing, which felt oddly respectful. No advice, no probing questions, just a presence that didn't demand vigilance. Eventually, she reached out and gently lowered the binocular from his grip to his lap. Her touch was light, like moving a sleeping cat that trusted the hands holding it. "Eyes can rest and still see," she murmured, returning her gaze to the open sky. He noticed how attentive she was without appearing tense, aware without searching. When a loud noise echoed from across the park, she simply turned her head, then relaxed again. No rush to interpret, no story built around the sound. It was the first time he had seen awareness that didn't look exhausted. He felt something inside him loosen, though he couldn't name it yet. She invited him to try a small experiment, just one slow breath while watching nothing in particular. He hesitated, then followed, inhaling as if he were borrowing her steadiness. For a moment, the world didn't tilt toward danger or prediction. The binocular rested quietly, forgotten between them on the bench. He realized how long it had been since his hands had been empty in someone else's company. As the lights softened toward evening, she stood to leave, offering no grand farewell. "Clarity doesn't come from chasing," she said, almost as an afterthought. He watched her walk away, unhurried, blending into the calm she seemed to carry with her. The bench felt different now, less like a lookout post and more like a place to pause. And as he lifted the binocular again, he sensed it might not behave the same way it always had. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More 2 Bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. He returned to the park the next day, half hoping the woman would be there, half unsure why it mattered. She sat on the same bench, as if time had politely waited for him to catch up. Without greeting, she nodded toward the binocular and then toward his eyes. "Today, try watching without the extra weight," she suggested, her voice gentle but certain. He lowered the object to his side, feeling oddly exposed and relieved at once. They sat facing the open field, saying nothing for a while. Thoughts arrived in his mind like anxious messengers, each demanding immediate attention. Normally, he would have chased them, building plans around shadows. This time, he simply noticed them pass, like birds crossing a wide sky. To his surprise, none of them stayed long enough to cause damage. A sudden shout echoed from the street, sharp enough to tighten his chest. His hand twitched toward the binocular, then paused midair. The woman remained still, attentive but untroubled, as if listening without leaning forward. He followed her example, letting the sound exist without turning it into a warning. Soon it faded into ordinary noise, leaving behind an unexpected calm. "Thoughts are only visitors," she said quietly, tracing a circle on the bench with her finger. "They knock loudly when we pretend they're permanent residents." He felt a small, almost shy relief bloom in his chest. The disasters he rehearsed so faithfully weren't happening now, not in this quiet moment. All that existed was the breeze, the distant murmur of life, and his steady breathing. Before leaving, she handed the binocular back to him, not as a burden, but as a choice. "Use it when it's useful," she said, "not when fear insists." He turned it over in his hands, noticing how ordinary it looked without urgency attached. For the first time, he slipped it into his bag without feeling compelled to reach for it again. And as he walked home, the present moment felt less like a fragile truce and more like solid ground. At first, the changes were so small he almost dismissed them as coincidence. He would catch a worried thought forming and, instead of following it, simply nod at it, like acknowledging a passing stranger without inviting them into his home. The binoculars stayed in his bag more often, quiet, patient, no longer tugging at his attention. He began to sense that vigilance could soften without disappearing entirely. One morning, after a restless dream, he felt the old urgency rising again. His hand reached for the binocular on the bedside table, then stopped halfway. He sat there, breathing slowly, letting the wave of worry crest and fall on its own. The room remained safe, the ceiling unchanged, the day not yet demanding anything. It was a small victory, almost invisible, but it left a gentle warmth behind. Moments of relief appeared in unexpected places, waiting in line, Washing dishes, tying his shoes, he practiced noticing the simple rhythm of breath whenever tension crept in. Sometimes he even smiled at himself, amused by how dramatic his mind could be. The world didn't collapse when he paused. If anything, it seemed to welcome the space. The habit of scanning began to feel like an old coat he didn't need in mild weather. Gradually, the binocular lost its tight, symbolic grip on him. He polished it less, carried it less, thought about it less. When he did lift it, it was out of curiosity, not fear. The lenses showed ordinary scenes. A couple arguing, a cat balancing on a wall, nothing ominous. He realized he could look and then set it down without the familiar aftertaste of dread. One evening, he placed it by the window and watched the sunset with his bare eyes instead. The colors unfolded slowly, asking only to be seen, not interpreted. His shoulders lowered without instruction, as if remembering an old language of ease. In the quiet reflection of the glass, he looked less like a guard and more like a traveler resting, and he sensed that the next test of this fragile calm would arrive sooner than he expected. The test arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, disguised as a message that felt colder than it needed to be. A few clipped words from someone he cared about, easy to misread, easier to fear. He felt the familiar surge, that urge to predict the worst before it had a chance to soften. His eyes drifted toward the window where the binocular rested, quiet but noticeable. For a second, the old script hovered, waiting for him to play his part. Instead, he placed a hand on the table and breathed once, slow and steady. He let the discomfort sit beside him like an impatient guest, no rushing to interpret, no frantic rewriting of conversations in his head. Outside, a breeze stirred the leaves, ordinary life continuing without commentary. He answered the message simply, responding to what was said, not what he feared it meant. Later that day, a colleague's careless remark brushed against an old insecurity. He felt the sting, sharp but brief, like stepping into cold water. Rather than scanning for hidden insults, he excused himself for a minute and stepped outside. He noticed the ground beneath his feet, the sound of distant traffic, his own steady breathing. When he returned, the moment had shrunk to its true size. Something in his calm began to affect the space around him. People spoke more gently, lingered a little longer in conversation. His presence no longer carried the quiet tension of someone bracing for impact. Even silence felt easier, like a shared pause instead of an awkward gap. It surprised him how steadiness could be as contagious as anxiety once was. That evening, as uncertainty lingered without resolution, he sat by the window again. The binocular remained untouched, catching the last light without asking to be used. He realized he could be attentive and peaceful at the same time. The night unfolded without catastrophe, just the slow turning of hours. And in that calm waiting, he sensed there was still one final lesson approaching, gentle but important. Some nights later, he found himself awake again, a single worry circling like a restless moth. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet fear that refused to settle on its own. He sat up, noticing how quickly his mind wanted to solve it before understanding it. The binocular glimmered faintly on the shelf, present but no longer commanding. He remembered the woman's voice, soft as a memory. Watch, don't chase. So he tried something simple, almost embarrassingly small. He placed both feet on the floor and took one slow breath, then another. Instead of wrestling the thought, he pictured setting it beside him like an object. For a moment, the worry seemed less like a storm and more like a passing cloud. His chest loosened, surprised by how little effort calm required. The thought returned, of course, stubborn in its familiar path. He greeted it again with the same quiet attention, as if saying, "I see you." No arguments, no predictions, just a brief pause to feel the air move in and out. He noticed the room, the faint hum of electricity, the soft weight of the night. Life, it seemed, was happening gently underneath the noise of his fears. After a few minutes, the urge to reach for the binocular faded entirely. He leaned back, resting his hands in his lap like someone who had put down a heavy bag. It wasn't that the worry had been solved, it had simply stopped dominating the room. He realized this was something he could do anywhere. In a hallway, a parked car, a crowded store, a quiet practice no one else needed to notice for it to work. When he finally lay down again, the darkness felt less like a threat and more like a blanket. The unanswered question still existed, but it no longer demanded immediate action. He drifted towards sleep with the strange comfort of someone learning a new language of peace. On the shelf, the binocular rested in shadow, almost indistinguishable from the ordinary objects around it. And as the night deepened, he sensed that understanding was settling in, preparing to reveal its quiet conclusion. By the time the woman returned to the bench days later, she noticed the change before he spoke. He sat with empty hands, watching the world as if it were allowed to be unfinished. The binocular rested beside him, not hidden, not clutched, simply there. She smiled in that knowing way of someone who trusted quiet progress. "Seems you've learned the difference," she said, settling beside him. He nodded, unsure how to explain something that felt more like remembering than learning. Worry had once promised protection but delivered only exhaustion. Awareness, on the other hand, asked for nothing except presence. It didn't shout warnings or rehearse tragedies. It simply kept him awake to what was real. For the first time, safety felt less like armor and more like clear sight. A sudden commotion rippled through the park. Raised voices, a dog barking sharply. He felt the old reflex stir, a faint echo of urgency. His hand moved toward the binocular, then paused, hovering just above it. He listened, attentive but steady, allowing the moment to unfold without interference. Within seconds, the noise softened into laughter, the tension dissolving on its own. He let his hand fall back to his lap, a quiet decision that felt almost ceremonial. The woman watched him with gentle approval, as if witnessing a door close softly behind him. Around them, life continued in its imperfect, unscripted way. He realized awareness didn't prevent storms. It simply kept him from inventing them. And that clarity felt stronger than all the worry he had ever carried. As the sun dipped low, he lifted the binocular one last time and placed it on the bench between them. Not discarded, not revered, just an object that had taught him something. Together they watched the evening settle, eyes open, hands at rest. The horizon held no hidden threats, only the quiet promise of another ordinary day. And in that shared stillness, watchfulness finally felt like peace instead of fear.